just descriptive. So we've kind of put all these things together. We have, in our interview guide, we have a bunch of questions we wanted answers to. We have a bunch of things that are aggregating as patterns. This is the point to say, okay, we think there's 7 or 8 things we want to report on. If you want an example of this, if you look on the internet, and there's a project we have on Portigal.com. It's called Reading Ahead, and it's a series of posts that describe a whole research process. There is a post in that series. If you just Google Portigal Reading Ahead, you'll get the link, and it will say there's a top line summary there, so you can see what level of fidelity we're at, what we're kind of describing. At a sort of another level, like here's an output without any content, but you can see like it's a 5 or 6 page Word document, just some like headings and some bullets. And this is meant to say, okay, let's stop, let's look at this. Here's what we heard. What did you hear? What do you have questions about? What are you intrigued by? What do you want to debate? What are you kind of struggling with? And then when we go into the deep dive, we have some kind of alignment around that. Also remember, I'm coming from the consulting point of view, where I am supporting somebody else by doing this research. I need to engage them and kind of help them through that process. So I have kind of a client orientation in the examples I'll give, which I'm sure applies to most of the work you guys do. So now here's the next process. So we've done this top line. We have some stakes in the ground, some things we're kind of scratching on. Now we go back and do the deep dive. Let me just skip this. That's kind of so this first step is to go heads down. This is going through video, artifacts, photos. Definitely a big thing for us is to do transcripts. We record all of our videos on either digital audio or digital video. Can get an MP3 or whatever out of those really easily. We budget every project with this to get transcriptions done. We use this service called Chromalum. They're very, very nice. You upload an FTP, the MP3 file, and you get a Word document back in a couple of days with time codes and everything. Going back to video, as I'm sure you know, is just difficult. I know you know that because I remember you doing that. It's very difficult and time consuming. So the sort of the shareability, and not that the transcript is full fidelity, but it's a thing that we can use to kind of go forward. We divide them up. Here's who's going to do the synthesis. Here's who's in the field. Everyone gets their number. I like to print them out because I like to be very scribbly, as you can see in that example there. It's just, depending on your training, you might call this coding. I call this like marginal scribbling. I don't know what my categories are. I'm just looking for the spider sense. Like, oh yeah, oh that's something. Oh, there's something here. And I'll make little kind of notes here. I think, what does it say? Oh, this is someone talking about finance, and they decided to put aside 20%. How do you decide on 20%? I don't know. I just knew that. So my little marginal note is rule of thumb without an attribution. That was kind of the idea that people have ways that they're managing money, but they don't know where those kind of rules came from. So again, I'm not laddering any of this up too much. Obviously, as you're reading through one, you start to find little patterns, but what you see really clearly here is Steve's voice versus kind of the data, right? You can do a little archaeological blowout and like, here's the data, and here's my voice. If you can't get transcriptions done, budget or timing or whatever, I sort of do my own, and that's, I'll listen to the audio. You can listen pretty fast speed with that anti-chipmunking software and just like type as fast as you possibly can. But what also is important here is you can see the all caps. Steve's voice is broken out from descriptive voice. I'm really sloppy. There's typos. Sometimes I'm writing in the person's voice. I did this and this. Sometimes I'm writing in the observer voice. I don't remember which is first and third. She did this. She told us that. But when I'm interpreting or synthesizing or making a conclusion or hypothesis, go all caps or go purple or something, so that it's just very clear what you're reporting on and what you're interpreting. Then what we do is we all come back together at some point. You have 4 days to go through all these transcripts. Come back together where you have a group session. It's face-to-face. It's in front of a whiteboard with a lot of Post-it notes. And we use each interview. We go through each one in turn. We introduce the person a little bit. We talk about who they are. We sometimes we have their pictures up around so we can just tell everyone, this is so-and-so. It might be one that I was at. It might be one that you were at, but I wasn't at. But now you can fill it in with some color. And then those things that you've called out, whether you've kind of scribbled and circled, maybe you want to pick your top 10. we present those back. So there's something here about kind of people getting rules of thumb, but they don't know where they're coming from. We might discuss it. The first one takes forever, right? Because everyone has to chime in with something that they've been thinking about. Eventually, you figure out what your bullet point is. Goes on the Post-it note, put it up. Sometimes we'll cluster as we go. Sometimes we'll just throw them up and then stop once in a while and kind of regroup. There's a lot of, we could say a lot about clustering. I'm going to skip over clustering slides in a minute, but that's kind of the process there. And I think that structure of the storytelling is really important, to go through John, to go through Samantha, kind of one by one by one. And, I want to say about, it probably averages about 45 minutes to an hour to go through a 2-hour interview together. The first one probably takes 2 hours, and the last one probably takes 30 minutes because you're bored and you've kind of covered everything. So it's kind of a sliding time thing there. But this is the deep dive, right? This is where we're coming to things that were not in the top line. This always blows away everything in the top line in terms of its depth and its nuance, and its kind of rigor. I'm going to skip some things about stickies here. Do people want to ask questions or challenge or anything now? Yeah.
How long does it take to usually write the top line report? What's the...
It's probably like in terms of a budget item, it's probably like a 6 to 8 hour budget item across a couple of different people, including like the actual hour we'll spend going through it. So, yeah, I mean, it's short, relatively speaking, right? It's probably one person for half a day, and then it gets passed around, and we kind of edit it and build it up.
Okay. So when you're trying to involve your stakeholders, and I'm presuming you're developing these pieces of your synthesis and analysis so that someone can read them, and stakeholders never have enough time to do all this. They're really busy. What are the ones that are most critical for the stakeholders to read in order to be productive in that deep dive session with you?
If you want to come to the deep dive, you have to sit there with a transcript and go through it. I mean,
that's what you require them.
Yeah, otherwise you're not. I mean, there's reporting out processes for people that aren't. It's for people that want to get their hands dirty and roll up their sleeves and other cliches. We're leading obviously to a report and a session together. Those people that didn't go in the field or didn't go in the field and don't kind of have ownership, I don't think we don't include them.
So the transcripts are really key.
The transcript is kind of the key, and then taking an hour or a couple of hours to go through it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's every engagement is different. Do we have people that are going to go in the field? We hope so every time. If so, are they going to kind of go and really jump in and go to lots, or are they going to send this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one? When we have the folks that are repeatedly engaged, they jump at the opportunity to do this with us, so we're really lucky. Obviously, there are people that, I mean, it's self-defining, right? The stakeholders that we can engage with that are not even kind of brought in there.
Right.
I don't know if that's really an answer
Yeah,
or a dodge to your question. Still skipping sticky stuff here. I think this is understandable. Now, this is an interesting thing for us, I think. This varies. I mean, we've had some people on our team that are just more wired analytically than synthetically. And so one person brought in this process where they would, once we had the boards kind of organized, they would take that and then type it all back into a spreadsheet. And that further processing was really interesting because you could you could code and sort. Even the process of kind of taking the scrawl on the Post-it note and typing meant that you kind of buffed it up a little bit. And what this lets you do then is when you get sort of further down the road and you have this kind of idea, oh, everybody's blah, 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 you can go back and you have, it's a very sort of qualitative set of data that you have, but you have it in a searchable, sortable format. You can go back and check some of the things that you kind of got to. I gotta say, we don't always do this. This takes a certain kind of, you have to have a certain kind of brain to be able to do every one of these steps, I think. So this is a really interesting step, but it really requires you to have kind of the patience and the, get off on analysis, maybe more than synthesis, right? If I go back, I'm not going to go all the way back. That thing where we're sitting in front and telling stories, that charges a certain kind of people. This kind of, that's kind of creating more chaos out of chaos. And then this is, I think, for a person that likes to kind of boil it down into data. for me, I would probably start to boil this down into words and stories. So there's a lot of variation here, I think, but I'll at least draw a spine for you. I think I described this already. So what's the output here? So in terms of what are we trying to get to in the synthesis section, this is something I learned a little bit from the person that really brought it to mind for me was your old colleague David Gilmore. I think he called it like a user experience brief, and we've kind of dropped that language, but just this idea of opportunities, which is somewhere in between. It's not what you should do, it's kind of the criteria for what you should do, and it's not findings. So it's, again, a little bit of a, we're stepping in between two endpoints. It's not findings, it's not solutions, it's change that we can believe in. I mean, to sort of misquote somebody, it's the idea of how we want to see the world different and for the people that we're designing for. Not, we're going to be the number one, provider of such and such solution. No, people are going to be able to do this thing differently in the future. It's about the business question, but we're starting to reframe that question that we started out with. And I think the key is at the bottom here, there's many possible solutions for this. So they're really powerful in the context of a project, and they sound very generic outside. So this Post-it note, those are actual ones from an actual project that I can show you because there's nothing proprietary in them, and they seem very wishy-washy. I have to apologize for that. They were galvanizing for the team because they never really thought about what we're going to learn from the research in those terms. And so you read this and you're like, well, of course everything should be like this. Of course we should be seamless and we should have the human touch. Not on the table at all. So this is kind of the key output is this, what are the kinds of things that we could do.
Steve, before you go out and do this work, are you doing any pre-work with your team to, come up with hypotheses or really help them come up with some focus questions? Like, what are we looking for that will help you get to the opportunities?
Right. So this sort of set of slides starts in the middle of the process, right? So there's things that I didn't describe. Well, spending time with stakeholders, interviewing them, trying to come up with, even that starts in the sales process for us. Here's what the problem is, as stated. Here's what the business objectives are. Sometimes we kind of like, well, maybe there's something else here that we may push back against or kind of hold in check. And definitely the stakeholders collecting having them educate us. Here's the research we've done, here's the designs we've done, here's the challenges we have, here's the history of our company and why we've been a success or a failure. Really, really immersing in that. The development of the field protocol, whatever tool you want to call that, the thing that we're going to use, to the methods, the stimuli, the prompts, set of questions, the plan for what's going to happen in the field now becomes, okay, everyone, here's what we think we're going to learn about. Maybe we have objectives at the beginning, but then the details. So they can sign off on, yes, it's going to be a surprise, and it's going to be different, but here's what we think we want to cover. And that's a pretty interactive thing that happens. They're with us, of course, so those debriefs also include, like, well, what else should we be asking, and reflecting on the process as well. So here's kind of the steps, if I had to break analysis down. It's the top line, it's the individual analysis, it's that collaborative analysis, and then you have this option of this successive, sort of more analytical, putting it back into data, and then the opportunities. That's what a lot of most of our projects kind of follow this set of things. I'm afraid I'm going to click while people are still writing. So this is where I think we're at the transition slide to talk now about ideation. So what do we do with these opportunities? So just in terms of there's no slide about this, but what we do as a vendor, as a consultant doing research is we have one session where we come back and say, okay, everyone, here's the PowerPoint presentation, here's what we did, here's what we learned, here's the people we talked to, here's these kind of there's always findings. Here's a question you had, here's the answer to it. Here's an emerging theme to think about, here's how the problem has been reframed. We'll kind of work our way all the way up to this discussion of opportunities. And that's, it's interactive, it's a discussion, but it's like the deliverable of the research. I don't want to call it report because that's not really our goal, but that's sort of when we leave, here's the documentation of what we learned that you have from Portigal. Then we come back. It's a different session. It's a different day. It's, this is the workshop. This is the ideation activity where now we want to mess with this stuff. We don't want to mess with it at the same time as we're reporting it out, because that's like a handoff. And, if I'm speaking to you, you need some time to absorb that and digest it and sort of feel some ownership before you come back and get your hands dirty. So it's it's sort of the theater. It's like it's a separate day. A couple of days later, come back. This is now where we want to, and maybe you've seen this before, it's the how can we question. So we actually make this an explicit step. We're going to write how can we in front of what we ended the previous day with. How can we keep the human touch in communication? This is like a simple trick that I think I learned from somebody at IDEO, but it starts to reframe it. I mean, if I say how can we keep the human touch in communication, no matter how bored you are right now with my nattering on, your brain starts to want to answer that question, right? And most of us aren't designers. As designers, like you already started, but everybody else can be kind of engaged with that. So we're shifting research into kind of a creation activity. We're not saying how will we or how should we, just how could we? So it's kind of broad and generative.
More of a process question. Are you all in the same room during the we're having trouble because we have people everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to know if you've dealt with non-co-located teams at all or anything like that.
We don't have a solution for that. Yeah. I mean, it's a good one to work on. Some people in Microsoft had, I mean, you guys have this video wall, so you have at least what I saw when I walked in was like people at the other location as if they were in this room. There's something here that's kind of higher. I mean, it'd be fun to play with that. That's, if I can get a projector that works when I walk into a corporate setting, I'm like, great. Part of reframing the problem now is to start talking about what area of the business could we impact. So we do a little quick brainstorming activity to come up with what could be designed, what could be made, what could be specified, and anything. I mean, for the purposes of this session, anything. If you want to buy McDonald's, if you want to change the legislative rules that the FCC uses, if you want to, whatever, all the things that can be made or enacted should be on the table for the conversation. Right, and the ... behind that's the theme of all of this is right. Even if you can't do that, maybe you can do something else. I want to talk a little about solutions and strategies. So we're in this process where we're now starting to answer the how can we question. This is a thing this actually happened to me. I led a workshop with design students in Istanbul, and their observational activity produced the need that, the problem was that people smoke outside, but they get cold and wet. I love that, oh wow, I'm clearly in Europe because the problem statements around smoking, which we just don't have that here. So, with any ideation question, how can we, can go in different kinds of directions. So here's a possible framework, and I don't mean that this is the only one, but one way that you can address that question is embrace the finding, support what people told you they have a problem with. Another one is that you can challenge the finding and try to redirect people's behavior. So sometimes these get conflated, right? Oh, we want to introduce a new thing and change people's behavior. Of course, in the research we find out people are going here. So these are different strategies. They're all ways of getting at the how can we question. And I don't mean that these are the only two strategies. Sometimes strategies are make it simpler. Sometimes strategies are make it cheaper. Right? Those are things that don't say how, but they start to generate a bunch of other hows. So, so think about how this might work. One solution direction, strategy is create a protective environment. That's embracing the finding. Well, you could use the facilities, so the bottom are the post-it notes, and the header there is like the different businesses that could, or aspects of the business that you want to leverage. So we could allocate an interior room, we could partner with a cafe, we could build a new pavilion. Those are all sourced from different parts of the business, and those all address one type of solution. The other is to challenge the finding and change behavior. Let's just eliminate smoking overall. So we could have smoking cessation games, we could have coaches, we could ban smoking and create new kinds of rules. So here I'm kind of going from a finding to an opportunity to a question to different strategies. Now the tree kind of gets broad, and then from within each of those branches you have ideas coming out of that. Now, that's very idealized. That's not, of course, how it really happens, right? How it happens is you have a question, you start generating ideas. Once in a while, just pause and say, is there like a strategy behind this idea? Is there something here that, oh, this is really about making it cheaper? Oh, well, if that's the strategy, not only can we charge 1 cent, but we can also do these 8 other things. So you're kind of going, I mean, I showed this idealized top-down, but really what happens is you get to the bottom, and then I suggest you go back up, and I'm going to go back a slide, and then use that. You've identified the strategy from the sample solution, and now you have strategies that you can pursue. I don't mean that every idea has an embedded strategy that you have to articulate, but just once in a while you hit something and you're like, oh, what you came up with is very different than what I came up with. And so let's just reflect on what that is. Maybe there's kind of a trigger we can use for other things. Just a little bit about good idea generation and what this activity looks like, and that it's collaborative, it's collective. I don't know if you've been reading some of these articles that have been going around about brainstorming and so on. There's Jonah Lehrer had one. He's got an article like every 2 weeks, but I think was his The New Yorker one about brainstorming doesn't work, and then there was the, which has been nicely refuted by a lot of people. But he described something. I mean, one of my takeaways from that article, and I've seen this happen, is, and I've seen teams do this, is everyone starts quietly and does their own things and then shares them. I don't personally like that, but that's just because I want to get the energy happening as a facilitator. I don't have any evidence that proves or disproves that's a good way to do it. So I think we try to encourage, the ping-ponging, the interacting, the kind of building and riffing on each other. With the bad idea, I've got an article going on Core 77 soon about bad ideas, so I could talk for 12 minutes about that one bullet point. But you see this happen, right? I don't think this is a very good idea, but I want to say it, right? And people kind of say a bad idea, and then you often hear that. I go, well, that's not actually a bad idea because I hear that we could do this. So you want to just have permission, be free, kind of offer stuff up, and do the yes and thing. Build on ideas, don't shut them down. We like to get people to sketch. People often like to write on like easel sheets with sort of 12-point type or 12-point handwriting, and you sort of don't get the. I want to get people to use different parts of their brain to suggest ideas, not to draw well, but just to show what it might be to kind of flesh their ideas out a little bit. It's a collective thing, right? You're trying to get a gestalt of the group to produce new things. Oh, the lemon here. You get in that situation where this is just kind of a thought exercise, but someone comes up with an idea and you can't find it in yourself to go, yes. So our idea was like, what if we had lemons on hand, and that when you hear a bad idea, you just go, take the lemon and you eat the lemon, and then when you're like, oh, yeah, it's the lemon. Your idea is great. So you have some reason for the face that you're making. Just a little conceptual activity. Just a little more on bad ideas. When you tap out, this is when you go for the deliberately bad ideas. What's the dangerous, immoral, killing thing that we can do? And I mean, this is cool because this starts to free the group up. Like, oh, we can actually play with things here. And of course, that these kinds of bad ideas, they loosen up things. This is actually, it's like a Philippe Starck product that actually came out. There's 2 different kinds of gun lamps that you can get. It really loosens people up creatively, and of course you can easily start to flip those bad, terrible ideas into possible ideas. So it sort of surfaces what are the boundaries. Like you say, oh, I've got a terrible idea. Let's be on this platform and that platform. People are like, that's not such a terrible idea. We actually are thinking about doing that. Oh, okay. And you can kind of loosen yourself up or check yourselves collectively. This is a thing, I'm sorry for the Billy Joel reference here, but Billy Joel reference. No? Anyone? Come on, somebody just save me here. Thank you. There will be no, I'm not going to sing. This thing happens in any kind of brainstorming activity. I think it's just good to be aware of it. You just got this amazing peak, right? The question comes up, how can we keep the human touch in communication? Oh, well, let's have, things on the side of the computer that, emit smells, and then they vibrate when your friend logs in to IM, blah, 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 blah. things that exist, right? Things that we've heard, design student projects. And people are like fast and furious. These things are coming up. Some of them are like things that are like, oh yeah, we should have that too, or that's a good solution. But a lot of it is just kind of working your way through it. And then you kind of reach this point and you're done. And I think what a lot of groups do is they're like, okay, we're done, next round. Right? They want to go on to the next thing now. But what actually is going on, shouldn't be a surprise to you, is this, right? There's a second round there, but you have to go through the first one to get to the second one. And if you don't have enough time in your process, and you don't trust yourselves to kind of to be okay with the like, well, I don't know. If you're not okay with that, you won't get to the second hump. Sorry to people that are watching this because I just flipped back and forth. But this is where the stuff comes up that's wacky, that's transgressive, and that's weird, and that some of it is breakthrough. So this is where the innovation, the new stuff, really doing something very different. Just like we talked about going from the top line to the deep dive, that's where the nuance comes from. It takes a second step in kind of the investment in time. This is the same thing here. You have to go a little bit further. So just kind of be aware of that. Watch yourself and your own energy, or the groups that you work with, their energy.
Quick question. How do you know if I'm in the first round or second round?
It's a great question. I mean, this obviously is, a mathematical representation of a very messy human activity, but I think you can look at your pace, assuming the group's working together properly, you're going to get a lot of stuff really quickly. And so I would sort of see, like, if you hit a lull, then you're maybe ready to move on to the second one. I think you've got to get that first stuff out and not try to shortcut it. But also the nature of the ideas. I think there's just an obviousness, right? Stuff that's been done elsewhere that we don't yet do is what I think you hear a lot of in the first one. We should be selling in stores or whatever, just like things that are kind of obvious. You don't get we're going to put a glass dome over downtown, like in that Simpsons movie. You don't get that until the second one.
Okay.
Now, obviously, like, I'm not saying that that's what you want to get to because that's what you're going to go do, but that's sort of a point of creativity you want to get to. It's the things that are also coming out at that stage. So I think you can, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, is this happening like in consecutive, like same day, same meeting, or is it like take a break, like sleep on it?
This is like we're going to do a 30-minute breakout, and you guys are going to take one question, you guys are going to take another question. In that 30 minutes, you should go through this process, absolutely. Yeah.
Sometimes what I've done when I know there's going to be that natural lull is that I'll bring someone in who's not on the team and like do a competitive audit, show us what you've learned, just to get the group thinking about something different that has nothing to do with idea generation, but kind of creates a tension so that they can kind of rev up for that second.
Are you saying tension or attention?
Tension, yeah.
Okay.
It's like, oh wow, there's a threat out there in the market.
So you're introducing the sense of let's not be satisfied with me too. Yes. That's in the first.
Yeah,
okay.
It kind of brings the stakes up.
Wow.
Yeah, and
I
it
like
helps
that a lot.
It kind of it's a good sort of mind meld. It helps the mind come together afterwards. So.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So here's the process. There's timing attached to this because this actually was a workshop, but so introducing the ideation questions. Brainstorming the business areas, that's kind of a group activity. And then, depending on who we've got, we'll try to break out. And, in this case, we had 40 minutes maybe for a couple of rounds, I think. And we have quite a bit of time here for sharing back as well, because I think that's kind of where other things happen. Let me hit prioritization quickly. I'm not even looking at the time. Oh, I've got 7 minutes. Okay. So what do you do right now? You've got this room filled with stuff, Post-its on the wall. And everyone's like, wow, that was really great. We have no idea what to do. And different teams are different. This is a picture from a hardware company, industrial design group, asked us to do this. They're like, our goal is to have like hundreds of stuff all over the wall. We're going to take that. We have an integration and prioritization activity. Other groups, this is really like exciting, and then what the heck are we going to do here? So just some quick thoughts on prioritization. The posted voting exercise is probably familiar to everybody. Some people are nodding. In this one, we try not to over-specify. You get 3 or 4. So this is a reason, I think, to draw, right? Because these are much, in this fake example, you can almost tell what these things are. You're selling your idea by kind of creating a seductive visual about it. And if you're in an environment where you can put everything up, I think this is where the multi-location thing becomes challenging, right? Because I'm not sure how you do the posted voting thing. You have to then capture it, post it, and do some kind of electronic capturing. The posted stuff's meant to be very quick, get everyone talking. I don't know how accurate it is, but this to me is about the heart. Where's the heart of the room? Let that come out. People are like, are we trying to pick our favorite or the best or the one that's going to come out soonest? It's like, I won't get into that conversation with people. Just pick the ones you want to kind of flag. I'll just refute any discussion of the categories. We want to see where the room goes, and we might go through and talk about it after and just see where the aggregation is. That's with the heart, and then with the head, Excel is your friend here. This could be. I mean, we did this once. It took half a day to go through the room, type everything into a spreadsheet. So here's how we've done this, and we agree ahead of time. Once you're in the room, it's too late. Agree ahead of time. We have a core team. I think we had 4 people. That was too many. On what are the criteria we want to evaluate on. So things like, what's the revenue opportunity? Does this fit our strategy? Can we maintain the competitive advantage? How feasible is this, right? You want to sort of track the Star Trek ideas versus oh yeah, we've got that. We can go do that. We already made that. Articulated, that's an interesting one you might put in there. How well is the idea? Well articulated, as I'm failing to do right now. People sometimes come up with the idea, they're like, bonuses. Like that ends up in there, but you don't really know what that is. But, the scenario that kind of shows it's going to work, it's going to finish this thing, it's going to happen this way, and then there's an app. They've really, that's a well-articulated idea. If you want to move forward, you might want to factor in how well-articulated the idea is. We do 0, 1, and 2. 0 means not at all. 2 means out of the ballpark. 1 means there's something there. I think to slice the voting there, now you're going to discuss, well, I think it should be a 2. I think it should be a 2.3. I think it should be a 7. So just keeping it really simple, yes, no, maybe is basically what you've got there. You could change the totaling algorithm to weight one over the other. There's lots of variations there. But we color code the ones that won the posted voting. We'll pick, anything that got 3 or more gets a color code. And then you've got to look and see where'd you end up. Did the heart say one thing and the head said something else? I don't have at that point, you have to decide what this thing shows about where you go next. But I think it's even worth just comparing. Geez, everyone here thinks we're going to make, the HAL 9000, for the iPhone. And in fact, that doesn't meet any of our criteria, but the group kind of thought that. So obviously next steps are political in a good sense. You want to create advocacy, move forward with who's going to own this stuff. So I think having a sense of where the heart and the head are different will inform that conversation. Everyone's happy about that.
So just comment from IRC.
Oh, I thought you were saying you're happy about we were wrapping up.
No. Comment from IRC. Can you suggest to the presenter that TED worthiness has been a useful attribute for me in rating ideas?
I love that. TED worthiness. That's good.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
Yes,
Nice.
just read an email. That's what we should have in the beginning.
So just, I'm presenting this I've presented it linearly through a linear framework, and just to remind us that, as experts, of course, that's not what we do, right? We do top down and bottom up, and we zoom around and so on. So I think being aware of a process, and this is mine, you obviously have yours, and hopefully this gives you a little more vocabulary for yours. Being aware of where you are in the process and when you are, kind of violating it and going up and going down, I think that's fine. This is what experts do. It's kind of messy and everywhere. So I just so you don't feel like I'm telling you to be, A, B, C, D. Here's the pitch slide for my book on interviewing, in progress. I just finished my second draft of the manuscript, and oh wow, thank you. You can go to this URL and sign up to be notified when it comes out sometime this year. I'm sure you'll be hearing about it through the Twitters and everything else. Questions that anyone has, or comments, or anything you want to add?
I actually have one question. So how do you know that when you actually get after the synthesis, how do you know that you actually get a really good insight? that it can be repeated, really envisioning to the company. I mean, I personally feel like this is not something that I do immediately after the field work for the next 2 or 3 weeks or even a month. Sometimes the things just keep coming back to me, and I'm refining it again and again and again, and to the point. Does that also, is the same kind of a pattern that you have in your previous research, or you actually feel there's some way that you can, secure that you can get really good, solid, crystal clear insight within some 2 or 3 weeks, or?
Oh, I like the notion that it's ongoing, and certainly there's other methods that. I mean, I don't think I'm describing something that stands alone and this is all we ever do. So it's nice to see other kinds of methods. Maybe some validation happens. Sometimes our work goes into creating some straw man solution that then gets researched on, so that we're sort of validating or exploring what we thought we learned. That's not always kind of feasible. Certainly we don't have months after we finish field work. We have to report something. I feel confident about that. I mean, I guess, the caveat is it's not the only time you ever go back and ask yourself that question. It's not, we have this insight, there it is, take it or leave it, never ask any more questions, you're good to go. I think that, as we move through different stages of product development and creating artifacts and testing those, that we're also exploring the takeaways from this phase of work. But I feel like, taking that focused couple of weeks to sit down and do this, I feel like the stuff we come up with is really powerful. And, how do you know? I mean, some of that is that sort of spider sense thing, right? Sometimes the more you do something, it's kind of the burden of expertise. You get it. This is really powerful. I mean, for me, if I start seeing kind of embedded in the insight how this is a big problem for everybody, no one has any solutions for it, no one's making any solutions for it, and our client is not doing anything, but they're hungry to do something, like, I start seeing, like, the world can be different if they act on this. I want to see the world different. I want them to have success. Like, those are the kind of emotional feelings I get, kind of, when I think about something. We just had one of these a couple weeks ago, and I just kept thinking, like, this is big. I don't know if they get this, but they better get this. This is it. This is big. This is going to change everything. And even though, so now the project's over, but every time I have my own experience as a user that doesn't include that support that there would be if they had acted on this, it's a brand new project. But I get that sort of validation kind of coming back over and over again. But again, I've already delivered. I can't do anything with that.
Yeah, I do agree that, if you have the right team, right amount of, the time and methods, that you can get something really, really good within a certain amount of weeks. I think what I was trying to communicate or comment on is sometimes I feel like if I get the right one, this thing like always just probably same feelings always just there inside my head, just like never let it go. And then I feel like if other teams can repeat it, they can quickly get it, like they can repeat it again and again. I feel like, oh, this is a really good insight because other people can connect it with it immediately. They use exactly the word that I said in the past, and then they can, they can run with it without me telling them what does it mean, what does it exactly mean. So that kind of like
I love that.
Feels like really, really like wow, I'm so satisfied.
Yeah, I think there's a whole talk that I have that that we've been talking about and stuff too about what happens after and how do you have this work take root in the company and impact teams. And I think what you're saying is great. You're reaching out to multiple teams. You're kind of giving them this as starting points and helping them go forward with that. Across a range of teams. I think that's a great key.
Sometimes the insight is not clear or not really well done. It's not so mature. You won't see that effect. The other teams is not going to repeat what you say. They still have questions. There are still things that are unclear. Only our work is that level, that solid. You will see that they can just run. Understand it, got it immediately, and they will run it for you. Anyway, I'm sorry.
No, I don't think you should apologize. What you're saying is great. I mean, your role is kind of evangelist is kind of an overused word, but you're carrying this insights and you're bringing it and clarifying and reminding, not just at the kind of presentation time, but carrying it forward.
Yeah.
I mean, for us as outside vendors, it's kind of those gatekeepers that we rely on. So someone like you, I think what you're saying is awesome.
you're a research consultant, so presumably you have someone in the organization who, understands what you do and can be the evangelist for that company, and there's a reason why you're coming in. But for a lot of us who are part of product teams, but we're doing research, and I think there might be a tendency to get really bogged down in usability and that kind of evaluative research, and lose sight of the importance of generating new ideas that this field work can bring. How do you justify that type of research when you're in the product team and they're just like, they're doing Agile, they're developing a product, but you're going, hey, we have to keep going out and doing the field work to generate the new ideas? That's kind of a challenge that I face. I don't know if any of you guys do.
I think we all. We just
Yeah.
talked about it yesterday.
One of the things I've been working on, especially for sort of the last part of the book, is talking to user research leaders and organizations that face those questions. Because I'm outside, I've observed what my clients do, but want to hear what other people do that have fought that. Some of the things people talked about are trying to reframe it so that you're proactive instead of reactive. So if you can do research that's not a response to a request, that's maybe more at a platform level, and that's a really vague term, but we want to understand household information sharing in a mobile context. I don't know. Something that's going to we've got 8 projects and 8 development teams coming up in the next 2 years. If you can be proactive and do that research so that you're sort of taking, you're empowered to do research that's not responsive, then you're able to kind of, through your social connections, through sitting in on meetings, through being copied on mailing lists, say like, oh, we know that, and the answer is this. Or listen for those things and say, okay, the next time we do research, here's, this group and this group and this group are talking about something. The study to address that is this.
Right.
So that's some of that's about changing the dynamic. It isn't necessarily about new ideas or old ideas, but it's the relationship that you have to development.
I think it's also a good way, it's good to connect with your partners in market research, because they're sizing the market in a very meta level, and to be able to respond to some of those questions with qualitative research is important. So I think that the researcher can be a really good bridge between the market research and the product team.
Right, and some companies those are
Totally.
and some companies they're
separate.
put together.
Yeah.
And
It's usually separate.
yeah. So I think that's a great example of outreach. I really like that, because what the insights you have and the insights they have together, you sort of have the spark and the proof, right? You can start
the field work can make it real.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
That's good.
No.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thank you. Great questions.
Great.
Yeah, you can go for lunch. I have a